Not every outlaw was born to kill. Some were born just to survive. Severino was just a skinny kid, sunburnt and barefoot, with a belly that never stopped growling. But still, he smiled when he slept. His world was small. A mud hut, a father, with a knife on his belt, and a mother sewing by the dim light of an oil lamp. It seemed like nothing, but for him, it was everything. Until Wednesday came. That morning, his mother left early, saying she'd fetch water from the reservoir. But she didn't come back for lunch, or for dinner, or the next day. Severino waited by the roadside till nightfall, hoping to see her shadow walking back with the pot on her head. But she never came back. She ran off with a thug, one of those hired by the local coronel to beat up the poor and guard stolen land. She didn't leave a note, didn't say goodbye. She vanished. And that day, Severino's father died on the inside. The idea of stopping a moving train was insane. No outlaw had ever tried it before, but the prize was too tempting to ignore. The informant faced Lampião with cold confidence. The train's escorted, but the soldiers are overconfident. They won't expect an attack in the middle of nowhere. Strike fast, and we grab everything before reinforcements arrive, the cangacheros muttered among themselves. Risky, but Lampião never backed down from a challenge. He stood, dust still, clinging to his clothes, and declared, "If we do this, there's no room for mistakes, not one." Their plan took shape under the flicker of the campfire. What they didn't know was that a traitor walked among them, ready to sell out their ambush to the police. Word of the heavily armed train, packed with rifles, ammo, supplies, even heavy machine guns, spread like wildfire through the gang. For Lampião, it wasn't just a robbery. It was a direct strike at the government squeezing the cangaço. Capture that cargo, and they'd have the firepower to take on any volante. That night, Lampião gathered his men beneath the twisted branches of a huazeiro tree. The plan was simple. The train crosses the Rio Moto Bridge, a narrow choke point with steep ravines. That's where we hit them. Corisco, ever restless, sharpened his machete. Udze, Sereno, and Jararaca exchanged steely glances. Cajazeira, you and 2 others plant explosives on the tracks, Lampião ordered. When the engine passes, we blow the rails and trap the train. Cajazeira grinned. He loved fire and destruction. The rest of the gang would lie in wait, ready to strike the moment the locomotive halted, fast and without mercy. Virginio, always cautious, raised a hand. And if they fight back? Lampião calmly drew his revolver and smirked. Let that be their last mistake. Laughter rang out, but beneath it lay a razor-wire tension. They all knew even one slip-up could be fatal. In the days that followed, they marched under a merciless sun to the railway, choosing their ambush points with deadly precision. At last, on a moonlit night, they crept into position behind scrub and sandstone. Cajazeira knelt by the rail, trembling fingers on the detonator. Corisco gave a curt nod. When Lampião counted to 3, the world would crack open. 1, the steam whistle sounded in the distance. 2, the train emerged around the bend, its wheels humming, the ground vibrating. 3! Cajazeira pressed the plunger. The explosion roared like a thunderclap. Earth and flame erupted. The derailment was catastrophic. Now! Lampião howled. The cangaceros surged from cover, an unstoppable swarm. Corisco led. The charge, machete high. Rifles barked. Within moments they overwhelmed the stunned guards. Lampião vaulted onto a toppled car, eyes scanning for their prize. Crates of rifles, ammo, and supplies spilled onto the ground. But amid the chaos, a wounded guard lunged for an emergency alarm and slammed the button. Far away, the police patrol sprang to life. The train's under attack. Back at the wreck, dust on the horizon signaled cavalry reinforcements. The gang had to move. Now. Lampião barked orders. Load what you can and run. They scattered, firing as they fled. The chase was on. Hidden, Among the pines, Yoka watched, guilty and breathless. He'd warned the Volante, but nothing prepared him for Lampião's ferocity. Could Lampião escape this? Yoka wondered, lips trembling. But the captain never lost his head. As the troopers pressed in, he led his men into the tangled backcountry, disappearing like ghosts into the night. Lampião clenched his fists. Corisco, drenched in sweat, was still trying to tie the stolen rifles onto the horses' saddles. But there was no time. The captain was not one to give up easily. Abandoning a conquest was like spitting on one's own honor. But here, staying meant death. "Drop everything you can't carry," he shouted. "Fall back to the river trail." There was no hesitation. Survival was the only order that every bandit obeyed without question. They grabbed whatever they could, guns, cartridge belts, torn backpacks, and began to run. Running and shooting like cornered beasts, the military police noticed the escape. The commander yelled, "Don't let even their shadow slip away." And then hell broke loose. The chase began with fury. The bandits scattered along the narrow trail where the cracked earth of the Sertão cut into their souls and the red dust entered their lungs. Lampião led the way. He knew this land like the wrinkles on his mother's face. He knew where the trail narrowed, where the brush misled, where the dry bed of the Moto River could be salvation or a trap. "Run, boys!" Corisco roared, firing a shot behind him as he leapt over a broken log. But the enemy came like a hungry beast. The shots whizzed through the air. Some bandits fell. The dust mixed with blood. And the Sertão, accustomed to silence, now screamed with gunpowder. Lampião felt the pace of the flight slow down. The heavy backpacks, the stolen rifles, were slowing the men down. At the top of the trail, the commander of the police spotted the river path and howled. "They're heading for the riverbed. Send men to the right. We'll catch them at the exit." The soldiers obeyed, going around the hill, ready to trap the group where they thought it would pass. But that's when something gripped Lampião's heart. He felt it. He sensed it. One of the men running alongside him seemed more nervous than the situation warranted. His eyes were scanning the ground, as if expecting to see someone. It wasn't fear of death. It was fear of being discovered. The captain stopped for a moment, just enough to understand. There was another traitor. If Yoka had already betrayed the gang before, who could guarantee that there wasn't another leading them straight into the jaws of the wolf? Lampião shouted, "Change of course! Left, now!" The men hesitated for a second, but when Lampião spoke, there was no argument. The group veered into the brush, avoiding the obvious path. And at the top of the canyon, when the soldiers appeared ready to catch the group at the river exit, they found only wind and emptiness. "They changed the route," yelled one of the soldiers. The commander fumed with rage. Lampião had once again slipped through their fingers. Now the bandits tore through the brush towards the west. The pursuit still echoed behind them, but it grew increasingly distant. After running for miles, they finally stopped. Their faces were covered in dust, sweat, and silence. They had lost men, but they had escaped. Corisco spat on the ground and laughed. "I told you, Captain, these soldiers will never catch us." But Lampião didn't laugh. He knew. The police would return. And worse, the traitor was still there. Night fell over the Sertão like a heavy shroud. The gang set up camp in a clearing surrounded by silence. But peace was false. Lampião stepped away from the fire, his eyes fixed on the trail they had left behind. Something wasn't right. "There's still something wrong," he muttered. Corisco, cleaning his rifle barrel with a dirty rag, lifted his gaze. "What now, Captain?" Lampião didn't answer. He just walked over to the group, his gaze scanning the faces. Yoka wasn't the only one. It couldn't be. "If it weren't for me, we would have walked right into that ambush," he said loud. Enough for the group to hear. "Someone here led us straight to it." Silence fell like a blade. In the Cangaço, Betrayal was a death sentence. He walked among the men, analyzing, sniffing out the fear. That's when he saw it. Mané Estreito was sweating profusely. He avoided looking him in the eye. His hands trembled. Lampião stopped right in front of him. "What are you afraid of, Mané?" "Afraid of nothing, Captain. I'm just tired," the man said, trying to hide it. But the circle had already formed. The tension weighed heavier than the rifles. Lampião stepped closer. His voice came low, sharp. "It was you, wasn't it?" Mané opened his mouth, but didn't have time to deny it. Corisco's machete gleamed once and came down. The scream died before it left his mouth. Mané fell to his knees, his hands trying to stop the deep cut on his neck. The blood flowed hot and silenced the doubt. "Now we just need the other one," Corisco said, wiping the blade on his jacket sleeve. No one replied. In the cangacho, justice was served with a blade. Lampião knew they couldn't stay. Even wounded, they had to keep moving. "We'll ride all night. If the police want to find us, they'll have to bleed for it." They mounted again. The dust rose once more. The full moon lit their weathered faces. The trail left behind was one of fire, blood, and legend. Hours later they found refuge, an old mansion hidden among rocks and brush. There, at least for now, they were safe. Lampião dismounted from his horse, looking at his men. They had lost comrades. They had gained scars, but they were still alive. More alive than ever. Corisco threw a box of ammunition on the ground and laughed. It was risky, but worth every bullet. Lampião nodded with a slight tilt of his head, but he didn't smile. The taste of victory was dry, like the dust of the road they left behind. "We lost too many men," he muttered, wiping the sweat from his forehead with the handkerchief already stained with blood and dust. He took a sip from his canteen, but the water went down heavy, as if carrying the weight of every fallen comrade. Virginio, sitting on a stump, responded bluntly, "But the traitors won't breathe this air anymore." For a moment silence took over the camp. The crackling of the fire and the distant hoot of an owl were the only sounds. In the cangacho, betrayal wasn't just a failure, it was a death sentence. Whoever turned in one of their own didn't live to tell the tale, and Lampião made sure of that. Minutes later, a bandit covered in dust emerged from the bushes. It was Zé Peba, sent to watch the path back to the city. He arrived out of breath, his eyes alight with news. The camp settled into uneasy calm. Zé Peba approached Lampião, breathless. "Captain, the patrol pulled back. They returned to town, claiming we were all dead." "Dead?" Virginio laughed, shaking his head. "They never learn." Lampião exhaled a plume of smoke, eyes drifting to the starlit sky as if listening to the whisper of ancient gods. "Let them think that." "But what if they come back with reinforcements, Captain?" Zé Peba asked, worry creasing his brow. Lampião's answer was calm, almost gentle. "All the more soldiers they send, the more graves they'll have to dig." Again laughter rang out, but beneath the humor lay a shared truth. Rest would be brief. A swirl of legends in the Backlands over the next days. The Sertão, the harsh, sun-scorched Backlands, roiled with stories, rumors, and tall tales. At market stalls, in dusty chapels and roadside taverns, everyone spoke of Lampião's daring feat. Some swore he'd stopped a speeding train with a single shot. Others claimed he wore an enchanted leather vest that bullets could not pierce. A few said he vanished into the brush like a restless spirit, an alma penada. Meanwhile, in the hidden camp among the dry creek beds, the cangacheros, the outlaw band, celebrated. They feasted on carne seca, dried beef, swapped chilling causos, folk tales, and polished their newly acquired rifles. One of them pulled out a sanfona, accordion, and even in the shadow of death and loss, the rhythmic strains of zaxado, the northeastern folk dance, echoed among the thorny brush. The Ade, real impact, Here's the truth, this ambush was more than bold, it was surgical. It shattered the morale of the Volante, mounted police. It stocked the band with ammunition, supplies, even stolen medicine from the train's pharmacy car. Above all, it proved to the entire Sertão that Lampião was far from dead. In fact, he was more alive and dangerous than ever. His name once again passed through the Backlands in whispers filled with fear, respect, and awe. In the rodas de conversa, conversation circles under the tamarind trees, on the lips of widows, recounting their sorrow, even in the corridors of the local police stations. It was as if the Sertão itself had given birth to him anew, this time as legend, cultural glossary for American viewers, cangaceiro, often compared to bandit or outlaw, but in Brazilian culture, a cangaceiro was also a folk hero resisting oppressive landowners and corrupt officials. Sertão, not merely backlands, but a vast arid region in northeast Brazil marked by drought, rugged beauty, and a fierce, proud people. Sertanejo, literally inhabitant of the Sertão, akin to cowboy or frontiersman, with its own music and traditions. Zaxado, a fast-paced folk dance and music style born among the cangaceiros, rich in rhythmic stomps and accordion melodies. Brazil's version of a frontier's jamboree. What's next? So, are you going to believe only what you've heard? Or will you stay with us and see the truth with your own eyes? Subscribe and hit the bell to join us on this journey through history, myth, and blood. Like, if you crave real stories of outlaws, honor, and revenge, because the next chapter of this saga will come with fire, bullets, and vengeance under a moonlit sky.